Welcome to another episode of BSing with Sean. I'm your host, Sean Meeks. And on this show, I talk with people living outside the box and who are pursuing their creative and intellectual passions. And I have long-form interviews and conversations with them. And just really, I like connecting with different kinds of people, from all walks of life to show the common humanity we all share. And maybe one day, we'll discover life on other planets too. And I'll extend that to not just Earth, not just unite Earth, but unite the whole universe, go into other dimensions, talk to people from other dimensions, And maybe thousands of years from now, they'll bring back me as a hologram and I can talk to all kinds of people in the future too. My sister studies that kind of stuff about death and technology and holograms and all that. You should look her up, by the way, Tamara Niece, The Nieces got to stick together, so I just thought I'd plug my sister's thing there. Kneese. The name, the K is silent in her name. But anyway, for this episode, I'm going to play you a conversation I had with Rostafa, Rostafa, and he is a musician and activist. He does a lot of folk music and a lot of other genres as well. And he's also an activist, so we get into a discussion in the episode about current events and Black Lives Matter and the recent guilty verdict of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd, and also the protests that happened last year, and some of how he likes to use art as a way to bring people together and break down barriers, which is what I like to do with my show. And one of the main reasons he wanted to come on my podcast was to talk about a music festival he's setting up here in Montclair, New Jersey. It's the second annual Kemet Music and Arts Festival, and the first one was held last year during the height of the pandemic on September 27th, 2020, and it was in Jersey City, and it was organized by civil rights activists across the state of New Jersey. It provided a platform for musicians, artists, and activists to bring positive encouragement to Black and Brown communities. It was also a platform to promote Black and Brown businesses dealing with the hard times of the new normal during the pandemic. And through hard work, determination, and help from all associated with Kemet, left a lasting effect on Jersey City community. And I'm reading from Eventbrite. This is where you can purchase the tickets for the upcoming event, which is this year, Saturday, July 31st, 2021. The rain date will be August 1st. And Kemet comes to Montclair Brewery in Montclair, New Jersey. Rostafa, musician and founder of Kemet, is bringing both a live and virtual concert and arts experience coming towards the end of the pandemic. This year's Kemet Fest is a fundraising event dedicated to an album project by African American musicians to aid a black business in need. The album is called Black is Beautiful, which is dedicated to black culture worldwide during trying times in the black community. Once the project is completed, 20% of all album proceeds, merchandise, and performances of the material will be donated to a black business in need. This year features local talent including Rostafa and Company, Lynette Live, Howlin' Poets, and returning to a live stage since the pandemic, Little Bastard. I'll post the link to that in the description of this video, and you can read more details on the event in the Eventbrite link that I will share in the video and in the audio version of the podcast description as well. Anyway, without further delay, here is the episode, and I hope you enjoy it. Yeah. So how's it going, man? It's been a while. We did this before, right?
It was a few years.
Yeah, that was July. That was before I did.
Yeah, back in 2016.
Yeah, 2016. Yeah, and I feel like it's interesting. I feel like I have different kind of eras of my show. I'm liking this era a lot. This is the in outer space era, but I think the best one is going to be the Sean in his own studio getting paid to do the podcast.
Sean in his space.
Yeah. Sean in his professional studio having millions of listeners. That's going to be the best era, but this is one of the best eras too, the outer space era.
Well, we all got to start somewhere, right? So might as well start, on top, start in space.
Yeah, exactly. Exploring new galaxies. And well, right now I'm outside Earth, but you got to take it slow. I just got off the planet and I'm going from there.
You're at least in orbit at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and for just the listeners, I have an outer space background here. If you watch the video, you should look at the video version sometimes if you only listen to the audio, because I have the video of the interviews up now too, which is pretty cool.
Sean has his face that a mother would love at her kitchen table. Trust me,
Yeah.
he's good looking enough. Please invest into his visual ventures, if you will. Please do.
Exactly. Yeah. We got two good looking people here today for the show. Do the BSing. Yeah. So I guess just start off talking about yourself. I know you're a musician and you're also, I guess you're a bit of an activist too, right? Because you're doing this show that you wanted in Montclair that's kind of for a cause to support black-owned businesses. That's kind of what I saw from the event you showed me.
Yeah, so I mean, again, I'm a graduate of Montclair State University in 2015 from the BA Theater Studies program. And it wasn't just necessarily just musicals, but straight plays and all other stuff, because I was in theater for a long time. Also trying to get into film and that type of thing as well. So it really started for me, like, yeah, I would say like 2016 was like the first fundraiser that I did with like multiple bands, and we did it over at Garwood's Crossroads Bar, which is actually a really nice place, and it was really, really cool. And we raised a good amount of money for the foundation that we were doing. I think it was Charles Sellers Foundation. And in 2018, I was sort of kind of like wanting to do something else, but I wanted to do something that I felt like meant a lot to me and could also work in different avenues in different areas. And what we decided to do was, or at least me, that I decided I wanted to do was a tribute to George Harrison's concert for Bangladesh, which, by the way, a lot of people should actually really watch not only the movie, but listen to the album, because technically in America, let alone around the world, that was like the first major concert fundraiser. This was before Live Aid, Farm Aid, or any of these charitable, I mean, the Princess Trust, like any of these charitable organizations that would come out and support a cause. And the cause at that time was Bangladesh was pretty much in just like disarray. Whether it be starvation, whether it be like lack of medical supplies or whatever, it was just like that really struck Ravi as something that was really, really bad. And basically went to George Harrison, his good friend, which, by the way, that relationship brought both East and West personalities as well as cultures sort of kind of like at the middle of the 60s to kind of like build up our world back through like, again, music and all that stuff. And I felt like that would be a good initiative at the time, which was, again, in Montclair. We actually did it at the Unitarian Church, which is where they had multiple concerts, in the past years. And it went from just being about raising funds for a trip that I was going to go on. Then what happened was a house of prayer that I go to, which is kind of different from a church, but is where churches kind of come together, got flooded. And I realized, I was like, you know what? I want to give back to my community. And that became more of that than my own sort of kind of, self-serving, kind of goals that I have. But it really brought it back home. And I think we raised about maybe up to $1,700, which was really cool. And, I always wanted to do more, but it was just a matter of like, what does that look like? And then, of course, 2020 comes and we go through the pandemic, we go through all our challenges, but then all of a sudden we're going back to civil rights. We're going back to Black Lives Matter. We're going back to Indigenous lives are being, under attack. We're going against, Latinx. We're going against people that are Asian descent. And I'm just like, this is not right. And around the time of George Floyd's murder and me understanding about Breonna Taylor and what was going on, I really was taken aback to an idea that, nobody deserves to die unjustly, as well as regardless of what skin color you are. But again, no, the fact that the family's only gotten like compensation to a degree by the state or whatever people that paid them, but that doesn't bring a son or a daughter back. It doesn't bring a family member back. And I just started writing immediately, and it started to turn into an album project that I'm now currently working on, which is called Black is Beautiful, which is a dedication not just to what's going on with police brutality, but really an overall dedication to Black culture and my love for Black culture. And just to let people know, I'm multiracial. So like if one of my tribes gets hurt, I come running. So it's not
So,
like
so
I
what
favor one over
what
the
is
other.
your? I'm just curious. What is your full background?
Ethiopian, Native American, Dominican, French, Irish, and Italian.
Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of grew up with this whole idea that like if one of my tribes or one of my ethnicities were ever like under scrutiny, I would call people out. And not to do that to demoralize, but more so to educate. Because the thing is that, you know, just the other day, I just posted something on my Facebook, which was a Black portrait of a father, a grandfather, and a son, and they're all kissing each other. And in a very, you know, eloquent way. And then all of a sudden, a friend of mine shares it, and then a follower of his made an ignorant comment, going, "Well, you know, there no father, Black father, not directly, but almost to the extent like Black fathers are never there, and they're just a bunch of deadbeats or whatever." And I got infuriated. So this idea of white privilege, or this idea of separatism, or this whole idea of inferiority that you try to put out there and make somebody feel inferior based upon your standards and what your experiences are, you not only practice racism, you literally expose yourself as racist. And again, one may not think that they're prejudiced, but the thing is, though, that's based upon the idea that you're going to take a stereotype of a community and you're going to generalize the community based off that stereotype. And unfortunately, there are people that are still out there that say that they're not prejudiced and yet all of a sudden make commentary like that. And that's why, again, it's very important that you stand in the gap. Not you don't badgernize, or you don't, like, you know, bash somebody just because they said an ignorant comment. However, though, you will say to them, look, I am this. You may not know this about me. You don't even know me from Adam. But the last thing that you're going to do is disrespect a positive message that is going to literally bring a certain sense of um, wisdom that you can use. But again, no, we all have our own experiences. So that's another reason why I'm involved in civil rights. It's because the idea that it's not a matter of being politically correct. It's a matter of being morally and accountably responsible for our actions and what we say. And going back to the fundraiser aspect, that was another reason why I wanted to do my fundraiser that I created called Kemet Music and Arts Festival. And for anybody who doesn't know what Kemet means black or black land in Egyptian. And I use the cliche phrase that, you know, when you're on Kemet ground, you're on black land. And the thing is that we're not trying to be separatists when we just say that this is a Black event. Anybody can show up. Anyone is welcomed. Anyone of any ethnicity, of any cultural background is welcome to support Black art, you know, Black-owned businesses, Black musicians, and just people of color in general. And the reason why I did it was because I wanted to bring some positivity into communities, because especially after all the marching that we did and all the protesting that we did, and we still are doing that to a degree, I wanted to bring a positive, nonviolent nature to it all. And we did it in Jersey City at Berry Lane Park, and it was successful even despite, you know, the pandemic. We all distancing and stuff. And it was a great turnout. We had people from Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey overall, from both North and South. This year, we're going to be doing Kemet Music Arts Festival 2. And this is going to be at Montclair Brewery in Montclair, New Jersey, Saturday, July 31st. Rain date, if necessary, Sunday, August 1st, from 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. And the goal this year is actually, because we're doing a fundraiser, remember, for that album project that I'm a part of, Black is Beautiful. And our goal is to raise $10,000 to $12,000. So that way that we can have enough funds going into the studio and being able to record what we need to record. And then the distribution and all that other stuff comes later. Then once the album and merchandise that comes along with that album is released, 20% of it is going to go into a Black-owned business in need. So in other words, people are investing in me. I'm investing back into the Black community.
So this is so this is something you've been doing a while now. This isn't, but now you're getting more into it given some of the current events with George Floyd and everything, or?
Yeah, because my activism is not necessarily just based on marching, protesting, rah rah, screw this person, because at the end of the day, anybody can do that. My whole thing was I want to bring people from all different types of disciplines in one spot, not just to invest into other people, not just to invest their time and their energy in loving the performance aspect of what we do, but realistically building, conversations. Because I think one of the biggest, I truly believe this. I think the reason why we have so much war and violence in our world is because we have a lack of communication. And there's a breakdown in communication. I think one time Carlos Santana was talking to David Crosby about, how does he feel about performing for politicians, right? And Santana said, it's not so good. Like, the president asked me to play for him, and I said no. The Pope asked me to play for him, and I said no. And David asked, well, why? And Santana's like, well, let's just say that the Pope, let's say, has $3 trillion, maybe. You can give a portion for that and feed everybody for the next 100 years. I think me and the Pope have a different agenda. And again, and he's right, because that's somebody not talking to somebody. And I think you can't demonize somebody else that you're talking to, that's exchanging information, that is revealing the ills of where we're going wrong in our human race and our society. And it's more than just about power, control, and all that stuff. It's really a matter of rising above the occasion of oppression, against the odds, against what the quote unquote human condition is. Because unfortunately people like to compartmentalize each other, and I am not the type of person to do that, because at the end of the day, everybody has a story to tell. My story is really just more or less is being a bridge to bridge out different people from different places and bring them together and unifying. And I think one of my spiritual brothers that I go to church with prophetically proclaimed that I'm like a culture setter. So I definitely step into that role unapologetically. And I think festivals like these are very important because, again, it's more than just an ethnic festival. It's a celebration. And I want to celebrate, especially coming out of this, worldwide plague that we went through, and that's essentially what it was. And the fact that there's been also a lot of stereotyping and prejudice even against the plague itself through the Asian community, and also a lot of just pushback from all governments in general, in terms of not being more productive and more honest with their people, especially when they knew about it way in advance before we even got into the pandemic lockdown. And again, that just comes down to a breakdown in communication. And that's why we need to really be responsible in not just worrying about how much money we're going to lose or this and that, and more about how are we going to save lives. Because at the end of the day, you can build new jobs, you can replace jobs, you can build new companies, you can replace this and that, you can give credit where credit is due in a certain way. And it has nothing to do with politics, it has everything to do with your heart posture. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that lost jobs, that lost people, lost family. I mean, I lost friends to the virus, and I think there was even discrimination really against the Black community, because again, the Black and brown communities were heavily getting taken out by the coronavirus in large numbers. And the fact that Africa as a continent was able to really battle it the way that they did, and was able to rise up, because remember, they went through Ebola, and were able to get over that. And it's just, I feel that we as a society have to be even more responsible with not only how we think, how we feel, how we do life, but realistically, before we even open our mouths, we need to think before we answer. And I like to use the arts as well as communication as into supporting people of color in any capacity than just using my words, just because, again, anybody can have that conversation. Because again, I think music, as well as even worship music or any type of musicality, can evoke that conversation and evoke an emotional response that makes people want to do things. Because all throughout the pandemic, that's all I did was just do things. Virtually played concerts. I did social distancing events. And as a matter of fact, from a personal standpoint, that was actually one of my most financial successful years in 2020, because of the way I was able to handle myself and take advantage of the opportunities that I had. And I find that to be a blessing for myself. Again, I can't speak for anybody else, but right now we just need to, I think people really want to get back into the groove again and supporting people and investing into people, because I think coming out of this pandemic, things are just going to be so successful for those that are starting up a business or getting back into the business, and instead of just retreating, going to Florida. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and live shows are starting up again too, and everything. And yeah, and
Yeah.
improv. Yeah, I was doing. I'm doing some improv jams again at the pit. It's vaccinated only. That's starting up again, and there's other in-person things I've been going to. I'm glad. It adds to life. Even not having to. Once you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear like a mask at the gym and stuff like that. Like, it makes it easier.
Well,
Just
depending on the spot, because there are certain people that still require you to have a mask. And and it's funny too, because after I got vaccinated, because I know people that are not for the vaccination, and they actually do care about, like, their bodies and stuff, but then there's also people that just don't care and just are on the conservative end, that really want to just screw this, whatever, I'm doing whatever the heck I want. But I'm like, well, that's the thing though, if you didn't know how to take care of your body before the pandemic, that really shows now.
Yeah, I've mainly encountered people that are kind of scared of the effects, but for me, it's like I I had to twice. I had roommates that got COVID and got sick, and then I had to. It kind of interfered with my life because then I had to quarantine, and then I had to move back home for a bit while they recovered, and then also, um, yeah, also I edit a heart health podcast. That's like my medical expertise there, and I've heard a lot about from the doctors, just about like the effects of COVID and everything, and it's a lot worse than anything I've heard of the vaccine. But I do know a lot of people who are just kind of, I guess, because I don't know, maybe people don't trust like the powers that be, or they think that, I guess they're just worried about whatever long term effects there could be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I literally talked to a doctor right before I even got my vaccinations, and they even say, we don't know what's going to happen 10, 20 years from now. We don't know if it's something that's going to be hereditary, that's going to build up, and that's going to affect the child if you ever wanted to have kids, But the one thing that I did, here are my reasons why I got them. One was the fact that I wanted to travel, and I didn't want to stick the Q-tip gimmick up my nasal cavity, because I remember I got my vocals looked at a number of years ago, and they had to go through your nasal cavity in order to look going down your throat. And that was like one of the weirdest and most like uncomfortable feelings I ever had. So, and I only got tested one time, and I was already good, and I knew I never got sick once and never was carrying the virus, because I would always be in touch with my MD. Even after, when they started opening doctors' offices up, I went in and they were always telling me I was good. So I never had an issue with that, knock on wood. And then, the other reason why I wanted to get vaxxed was because, especially if it's somebody who cares about their body, I want to make sure that I care about mine before going into their circumference, because again, I want to make sure that they're comfortable before I'm comfortable around. That's just who I am.
I got the Pfizer shot, and I heard that was like the best one for me. It was also that I have older parents, and I wanted to make sure they were okay. And there's just more you could do. Like, you have to show your vaccination card for a lot of places.
Yeah.
And I also found out I was asthmatic too, but not like the regular asthma where you have it all the time. I think it's related to allergies, but I think that explains a lot of like sometimes why I'd get short of breath over the years, and I never knew that had to do with asthma.
Yeah, it's funny. I know somebody who actually has lupus, and one of the issues with lupus is that even if you try to get a shot or anything like that, it's just going to screw your whole system up, and you're very, very vulnerable. And and she's gone through like a lot of ailments. And despite all that, that's happened, like, she's a trooper, man. She's a real tough woman. I'll give her all the credit in the world. But I think, even, last year when I heard about college frat parties we're having, like, especially down in like South, the southern part of America, they were having parties to see who got COVID first. And you would get like, this big pot of money. And I'm like, wow, people just want to play Russian roulette with their lives. And this was already 2 months into the pandemic. And we didn't even reach May 15th before they started kind of opening up, parks and stuff like that, and social distancing, which shocked the heck out of me, man. And it's just one of those cases where, again, like I said before, if you didn't know how to take care of yourself beforehand, I'm not expecting anybody wanting to be around you. And the fact that, You know, back in the day, if somebody didn't wash their hands and you saw them walk out the door or whatever like that, that was already disgusting enough. Now it's like, you better wash your hands because I ain't want to get what you got.
Yeah, and that was it was during the lockdown that a lot of the stuff with the George Floyd and everything you were talking about happened, and I think it had kind of a unique effect because everybody was in lockdown and people weren't out and busy with their lives as much, so it was easier to focus on what was going on in the
And
world.
isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting how people were mobilized and forced to hear about it, even whether they wanted to watch or not, but hear about it. And not even just on the news, but just even on your social media. I mean, it is insane how we're living in a society where everything is pretty much, I mean, the internet practically runs everything now as far as like businesses and how we communicate and how we get news out faster than just writing a letter and going on horseback and riding 8 days. You know what I mean? We've come a long way from that. But I think I think the most significant thing with George Floyd, and again, every person of color that ever was brutally like either beaten or put to death by officers of the law who went above and beyond what their protocol was, literally just took the cake for me in terms of the way that George died. Because again, here's a guy, big guy, going through a mental health crisis, didn't even know that his bill was a counterfeit. And even the guy who took the counterfeit bill could even said in many interviews, he said, you know, I could have just waved it off, but you know what I mean? And this could have all been prevented. But again, no, as they say in heaven, we'll never know. So my whole thing right now is like, you know, trying to really sum up what happened with George. As a matter of fact, I'll even just give you a breakdown of one of the songs I wrote. It's called Four Cops. And when I wrote it, I literally almost treated it like as if I was reading a newspaper, which is what I did, and wrote about what happened specifically. And of course, the lyric changed from almost 9 minutes to over 9 minutes. So, and it was just, you know, and I've watched the whole video again, and I had to rewatch it, unfortunately, again, when we watched the trial. But man, I just, the old man, if you remember the old man that was in that video, and then he later was in a courtroom and he was just bawling his eyes out. Like, you got to understand, if you were not, cannot feel that, regardless of what you think about George Floyd's past or whatever, you have no soul. Because an innocent man, regardless of his past, regardless of what he did, because we all have a past. And God only knows the people that are accusing of George Floyd's past, they got some messed up stuff in their closet. They don't have some messed up stuff in their heart that God don't know about. So you do pay the price in one way or another. But for me, I think the unjust way of somebody dying in a situation where things can be prevented, especially by those that apparently we're supposed to trust in law enforcement, we can't trust fully based off a few incidences. But again, no, and just to give a little background a little bit on myself, I had family members in law enforcement, and they also served in the military. So I never once said FTP. I never once said, you know, F the police or anything like that. But I did, however, would challenge police and be like, yo, if you're not calling out your officers and you're not calling out people, especially in your department that you know about that are doing this type of stuff, you need to drop your badge and leave. Because unfortunately, you're not only having them endanger us, you're literally protecting them and endangering us even further.
Yeah. Right. Well, you said a lot there that made me think of a lot of different things. The first thing was about how you were talking about how judging George Floyd on his past. And I was just thinking, you know, there's a lot of kids that went to my high school that, or sometimes they shoplifted or they got involved with drugs. And then some of them turned out okay. Some of them are dead actually now. But I feel like they and these were white kids. A lot of the ones I was thinking of, they aren't judged in the same way for the past. Is like, I feel like with the African American or like people of color, like sometimes they want them to be saints. Like, oh, why don't they go Martin? And then also, why don't they go Martin Luther King's way? Is another thing they say. But then you look at the founding of the country. You know, the American Revolution was anything but peaceful, and those were like white. Well, I mean, it wasn't just whites involved in the American Revolution. There's also, you know, Crispus Attucks and many others involved with that.
And even slaves. And even
yeah.
slaves.
Yeah,
were battling too, and that's the other thing too. And just because they were a slave doesn't necessarily mean that they got freedom.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
They thought they were going to get freedom, but then ended up not.
Yeah. Right. And then, the other thing also is that, people always talk about Martin Luther King. Dude, in 1965, I believe it was, or 1964, J. Edgar Hoover said he's the most notorious liar in the United States. And it wasn't until about maybe 20 years later that all of a sudden everybody starts talking positive about Dr. King that weren't for Dr. King originally. And matter of fact, if you go to Montclair on Google and you type in Martin Luther King Montclair, there are images of Martin Luther King talking at Montclair High School, and outside are white protesters that are basically saying, "Oh, you freaking commie, get out of here!" And God only knows that they were using the N-word.
Well, Andy was assassinated, so I mean, it's even when he was nonviolent, it happened.
Right. And isn't it funny? And isn't it funny how we don't know how good we have it until it's gone? Do you know what I mean? And I'm not just talking Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, all the tragedies that we've had, within the Black Lives Matter movement. I mean, again, nobody was planning on being assassinated when they tried to, be a peace leader. I mean, again, Martin Luther King being inspired by Gandhi being inspired by Thoreau. You know what I mean? It's insane how we are in a situation in time where, as the human race, we want so much to be loved and respected and to love each other. But then the problem is we have different ways of going about it for our own greed, our own circumstances. And, I go back to Tupac's point of view about the rose that grew from concrete. I mean, like, even if it had a few petals and it was wilted to the side, you would marvel how a rose can grow out of the crack in the concrete. And yet you wouldn't have known that, out of all the dirtiest of circumstances one would go through, regardless of their background, can make you laugh, can make you cry, can make you, do all this other stuff. And you didn't realize that they came from that. And another thing I want to point out is, it's funny, you could talk about my Italian background. When we were marching,
so is that your mother? Is that your mother's side that's the Italian, or is that?
Yeah, that's my mother's side. Yeah.
So your mother is Italian and what the?
French and Irish. Yeah.
Okay, and your dad's so
Ethiopian.
You're biracial then. Okay.
No, multiracial, just because there's more ethnicities, and I can, and I mean, again, like, funny enough, we were marching in like Nutley and places like Woodland Park. And, I remember one time there was like this Italian heritage festival that was happening because, of course, people were tearing down like Columbus statues and stuff like that, which, by the way, it's funny. I never really talked about this openly, but, again, with all the statues coming down and all that other stuff and defacing statues, again, I had really mixed emotions about it. So I really didn't think about it too much. I mean, again, the argument is that, like, people shouldn't tear down statues, but I can also imagine the argument that people have been trying to have statues taken down through writing, and people actually, going into a lot of council meetings going, please take down the statue. It's disrespectful now. And even, even the argument, even Robert E. Lee said and quoted that he doesn't want a statue of him. They lost, and he admitted it, and stuff like that. But when it comes to Columbus, the idea that Columbus, with enslaved Africans, by the way, on that ship as well, came over to the Dominican Republic, Haiti area, and practically, and again, not Columbus necessarily himself, but his followers killed innocent native people. And yet he was exonerated by, I guess, the Queen of Spain or whatever. And again, I understand that there are people that say, "Oh, well, this is a part of our heritage, is who we are." I was like, "Yeah, but also,
well, not really. He didn't even discover the U.S.
Right, right, exactly. I mean, Vikings discovered the West before anything else, and even before that, Native Americans discovered the West.
Yeah.
But again, that whole idea that one can say that, "Oh, well, you doing this, like, oh, well, why do we got to be prejudiced against you?" It's not a matter of that America can't be a great possibility for all. It's just the idea is that people like to have a warped view of history just because they think that by having their pride be in front of their judgment, that they have a right to criticize everyone and anything that is disruptive of that nature. Because at the end of the day, this is more of a human rights issue than it is a political issue, and also even a financial issue in a lot of ways, and because people profit off of people's emotions like they do in the media.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. And they profit off divisiveness. I was just thinking of Bacon's rebellion. You know, that rebellion that was the farmers. It was the indentured servants. I think that's what it was,
Yeah.
right? The indentured servants, and then they were. It was like cheap. They were doing like unpaid labor, I think it was, and then um, they revolted together against the landowners, and then to
Yeah.
divide the African Americans and the whites, they started to try to turn the whites against the African Americans. So they would think,
Yeah.
oh well, you're still.
Yeah.
And then, but really, they were the ones oppressing both of them. But then they said, oh, but you're still a little bit better than them, and that was a way to divide them. But before that, there was unity, and they were both with Bacon's rebellion going against the landowners.
Yeah, and I think, one of the biggest tragedies is that, whenever we talk about oppression or we talk about any type of suppression of any peoples, apparently it just tightens an ignorant Caucasian person up to the point where it's like, why do we got to keep on being so negative? I'm like, well, guess what? If you're not willing to talk about the negative, you don't have a right to the positive. Like, you don't. And I know people that say, well, I'm not racist. I love everybody equally, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, do you love everybody equally? Because not everybody is everybody that you think of. And especially behind closed doors, when God only knows that there's somebody that you definitely admire, and all of a sudden they're doing the complete opposite of what you feel and what you think is right. Actually, I'll give you a little example. So I can't remember the pastor's name, but there was a guy last year who made one of the biggest errors in his biblical career when he said that, when blacks came over on ships and everything like that, that he called it a white blessing. Let that sit for a second. A pastor, a Caucasian pastor, saying that when blacks came over on ships, saying that that was a white blessing. He got so much backlash. I mean, dude, I don't even watch this guy. I've never even heard of him beforehand. And I literally told him, under no circumstances, I will never support, let alone ever condone anything that you do ever again. Not because I can't forgive you, because I already have.
That was a famous pastor?
Somewhat, yeah, regionally famous.
It's not that Joel guy, is it?
Oh, no, it wasn't Joel Osteen. It wasn't him.
Okay.
Joel Osteen's a whole nother bag of bones that I don't want to get into right now.
Okay.
And again, I'm not trying to.
I never knew too much about him, but he always looked like a shady kind of.
Yeah. I'm not trying to demoralize him. Yeah, I'm not trying to demoralize him. But at the end of the day, though, he has done some things that were like not right. You know what I mean? Put it that way. But again, we're all imperfect to a fault. We all have imperfections that we're trying to work out. But again, no, this is another reason why, the old saying goes, 2 ears to listen and one mouth to speak. That's from my grandmother's generation, you know what I'm saying? And that passed down to me. And, I think it's one of those cases where if we really observe, and it's funny, how like it is when you get older, you talk a lot less.
Maybe.
Like, just for some people, like, you talk a lot less because you're observing how you're incorporating or what's coming at you, especially when it's like a young kid, right? It's like, oh, I'm going through this and blah, blah, blah. Da, 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 da. And then all of a sudden, the parent or the guardian or the teacher or the mentor is like just nodding their head and going, well, this is what you should do. You know what I mean? And because again, you have all that adrenaline or all that, estrogen or whatever, just to like, basically say like, hey, I got all this, energy and I'm trying to like find peace in my valley, and they're able to guide you to the promised land in that vein. So, shout out to all the true, fathers, mothers, teachers, mentors, pastors that actually give a damn, rabbis that give a damn, because, it's one of those cases where, especially when one wants to be violent and one wants to be so angry and they don't know how to handle what's happening to them in real time. That's when it's like, at least in my perspective, that's when God wants to use you the most,
Yeah, and I was just thinking, this might be going a little bit back, but I was just thinking that the people who say, oh, George Floyd was just a drug addict, and that it's like, if they had a brother or a friend who was a drug addict and then he got killed, would they feel the same way? I mean, you've never known anybody who's like, you've never cared about anybody who's not always made the best choices and everything. Like, have you always made the best choices? I mean, it's like, why does he have to be a saint for his life to matter? Does he have to do everything exactly correct? You know,
Right.
it's like people of color are held to a higher standard. Like they have to be in order to be good. They have to be like this exceptional, like peaceful, like and they don't hold those same the people who say that wouldn't hold those same standards if it was a white person. That's just my impression.
Right. And
Yeah.
right. No, and just to go off that point, because you bring up a good point. Candace Owens, God, I can write books about her. Jesus, she's whew, whew. And it has nothing to do with her politics, it has everything to do with her heart posture. And granted that I give her credit because she's like, well, I'm not going to be labeled a victim, but yet you're victimizing with your words on other people.
Well, I feel like she sometimes says things for shock value too. Isn't that kind of her shtick?
Yeah, she's the black woman version of Rush Limbaugh.
Yeah,
I would like to think.
I guess kind of like Rush Limbaugh. Yeah,
you know,
I think Rush Limbaugh was probably a little more obnoxious. I think, but yeah.
Yeah, especially when you talk about people who are mentally challenged, and then you also talk about the Rutgers women's basketball team. You know, but anyway, which she did apologize for. But again, it's like, come on, dude. So long story short, you know, when Candace Owens said that I'm not gonna, you know, make out George Floyd to be a martyr. First of all, let me discredit that right now. Here's how George Floyd is a hero. He was a father. He was a brother. He was an uncle. He was a friend. He was a boyfriend. Because remember, you know, and I didn't realize until I saw the trial that his girlfriend was white. And again, he just like you and I, bro, like we have our days where, trust me, it's not good. Maybe even worse than other people. We don't, you know, other people don't know that. And by the time somebody gets to know you, it's like, you know, what the hell? And matter of fact, here's a little shock value for you. So the idea that Derek Chauvin's mom, who comes into the courtroom and says that there's misinterpretations in the media and such, maybe there's some truth in that, but there's also a lot of untruths in the sense that what he did was wrong, because what he did was wrong. What he did deserves time in prison. No one is bigger than the law. No one is bigger than the badge in which they serve and they took an oath under. No one is bigger than literally trying to steal one's life just because they think that, oh, this is what drugs do to you. First of all, there were no drugs in Georgia's system that day. None. And yes, he did, you know.
Well, even if there were, so what? Like, I mean,
yeah.
Most people, it's like, would there never be a day when they found drugs in my system? I mean, there could have been days where I died, and I mean, I haven't done anything stronger than marijuana, really, but there would have been days that they found drugs in my system too. Does that mean that, oh, I deserve to get killed that day? I mean, what's
yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and here's also the other thing, bro. Like, I know that there's a lot of people who battle addiction to this day. I still know people that do. And one of the things that I find troubling is that when one believes that they come to the pump, right? Because again, you don't conquer your addiction. You just say, hey, I'm an addict. And every day I have to go about my challenges and not acknowledge what I used to do and just move on with my life. I think Elton John just celebrated his 31st year of sobriety. And, you know, there's other people that say, hey, you know, I stopped doing pills and this and that, but I still do weed and stuff like that, which again, you know, I have no judgment on that in particular. But then all of a sudden, the conversation changes from a guy who was just living his life, trying to get a pack of cigarettes. And then all of a sudden, he's no longer with us just because of a counterfeit bill. Now, imagine if that person was white. Would it be as significant? And also, mind you, what if the officer was black? And then also the idea that, you know, you could change the scenarios however way you want it, but the fact that it happened the way it did is unjustified. And sorry, not sorry, 2020, along with the stories of all these black victims, are going to be talked about for eons, brother. I mean, this is a part of not just American history, this is world history. I mean, think about this. That week, people in Iran, people in Tokyo, Japan, people in Cairo, Egypt, people in Beijing, China, people in Paris, France, people in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, people in Mexico were all marching worldwide. That's insane. The fact that we have the technology now to reach people from another country in real time,
Yeah.
and we're able to come together to say to the world, this is not right. And if policy doesn't change, we will keep on marching and annoy you and put gray hairs on your head until you do, because we want to feel that we are protected, not based upon what your profit motive or your lack of power or your power in a sense that you're trying to hold on to just because it sounds good on your resume. Do you know what I mean? Like, again, it's like, I don't care how long you served in office. I don't care what influence you have. My whole idea is that if there are people that have a problem, and especially when there's an abuse of authority and also a lack of accountability from authority, that needs to be challenged. Authority needs to hold accountability and challenge authority.
Yeah, and
Period.
actually, wasn't that the whole? I mean, I know that there was the bad side of the founding. I actually wanted to get into later if you can acknowledge the good and the bad of the history, because some people wanted to do away with, the 4th of July together because not everybody was free. I was wondering if there's a way you could acknowledge that and also appreciate, the abolition of monarchy and stuff like that, and appreciate some of the good things as well. But I'll get into that afterwards. Wait, now I forget what I was going to say first.
I think we wanted to get into sort of kind of like the the whole idea of, again, 4th of July, that whole aspect, but then also like looking at it. Yeah. So here's the thing, I grew up in this country, brother. I was educated in this country. I was, taught, moral values in this country. So yes, I am a member of this society and a member of this land that we call the United States. And yes, that I do feel that there are certain things in the Constitution that are absolutely vital to our democracy. However, though, that doesn't necessarily mean that if we're truly going to say all men are created equal, then what does that term equal mean across the board? What does that mean in saying that, oh, somebody can't work hard? Well, it's not a matter of somebody works hard. Everybody can work hard. Anyone can work hard. That's not the problem. The problem is that there's this whole idea of competition with each other, that's saying that one can't succeed. It's probably because you don't know how to give. It's probably because you don't know how to invest your time into somebody else. It's probably because you don't know the history of, the fact that at one point or another, like if a Black person was denied housing in a good neighborhood, it was probably because that the real estate agent lied to them and then all of a sudden gave that house to somebody else who happened to be the same color that they were. So there, and again, now there's more restrictions on that in law, but again, no, there's still a lot of battles that are like that people don't think twice about, even in the medical community. I mean, again, I can literally talk about that for days, but the moral of the thing is that, July 4th, to me, yes, it is our Independence Day. Yes, it is technically our, country's birth, but I also know that there's as well as a Jubilee Day called Juneteenth, which now is a national holiday. I also know that there are more efforts to create even more indigenous days, which, by the way, and all due respect to people who love Columbus, or maybe not, I don't know, but I'm absolutely behind Indigenous Day more so than Columbus Day, because we are on their territory. Whether if you like it or not, we're on Native American territory. And I mean, it's a bold statement, but I wanted to make it. But again, no, as far as July 4th goes, I personally don't have a problem with it, because it's taken pride in the idea that we're all a melting pot. But again, no, still acknowledge the individual parts that make up that melting pot.
Yeah, that's I guess that's kind of along the lines of what I was thinking. That do you have to throw, like, you can, does it have to be, you can acknowledge the good of what there was, like some of the ideas in the Constitution, like ideals, even if we didn't fully live up to them when the country started, and don't even necessarily fully live up to them now, and also acknowledge how far we need to go and how far we come, and a lot of the problems, and that also that the country was founded on racism as well. Yeah.
Racism, slavery, trade, all the above. And then again, America is still young. Think about it. We're only 240 something years old.
Yeah.
I mean, so imagine the idea that we still got a lot of growing up to do as a society. And then also dealing with the fact that, yes, do we want to have things made in America? We want to buy in America and all that stuff. Yes. But remember, there's still international trade.
Yeah. But I just don't want, I don't like the idea of exploiting people in sweatshops across
no, absolutely
stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, because like again, even when I found out about Steve Jobs and what he did over in Asia,
Yeah,
I
for
was just
some Buddhists. I
yeah,
mean, I mean, I use an
and them not
iPhone,
getting
and that you see that doesn't mean I don't think that there's iPhones are useful or some technology made it useful. I just think that I don't like him and everything he did. So,
yeah, and also
yeah,
them not getting paid properly, like not having
yeah,
college benefits. Are you kidding me? You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like, for example, like you're there for hours on hours making sense, and that's barely covering anything for your family. And also, you're not getting properly educated, and you don't have college credits going into a university wherever you wanted to go. And people are saying, well, why should we do that? Well, it's probably because they're busting their ass for you while you're making billions or millions of dollars off their backs. Hence why, again, I think in our generation, the millennial generation, Generation Y, Generation Z, they're going to be considered known as the self-made generation, because now the whole idea of minimum wage is really being challenged to the point where it's like inflation is going to hit again, and all of a sudden we're going to want the minimum wage to rise again. So there's that whole idea of currency that's being built through Bitcoin, through crypto, and which I actually really want to get into even more so, because as a performer and as a storyteller, you want to have backups in all factors of your life, because you want to be able to take care of yourself and the people you love. And I think for Black entrepreneurship in general, it's really about supporting one another by doing this. It's simple, just like the Jewish communities, like the Korean communities, the Mexican communities. What they do is they create a circulation of wealth. And that circulation of wealth comes from almost like when you tithe in church, like 10, 15, 20% of your currency you put back into your community. And then that creates even more. Because I remember last year I went to a rally, and I asked, people who were making Black Lives Matter shirts, I asked them, I was like, how much of that currency is going back into your community? And they're like, oh, it's not. We're just keeping it all. And I'm like, looked at them for a second, and I kind of just like walked away. And especially when I was going to buy one. But then I realized, I do support my brothers and my sisters, and I will support them in any way that I can. But the one thing that I will not tolerate is like that whole like yuppie mentality, like me. It's all about me and what I got to do, because that's a survival mentality. That's a
Okay.
fear
Is that?
mentality.
Yeah, I always thought the yuppie mentality was, oh, I'm going to drive a minivan and take my kids to soccer practice, and I'm going to sip on a latte, and I don't know. But I guess
Right.
but I guess that's a yuppie attitude too. What you just, yeah,
Yeah, because the
I don't
thing
know.
is, it's like there's a song also on the album that I'm writing. It's called "Whitewash City," and that basically is about gentrification in a nutshell. Because I think one of the biggest flaws that we have when it comes to new developments in cities and towns and stuff like that, which, by the way, I don't mind if you rebuild a new lot, or if you build
What?
a
Yeah.
new,
Well,
like this.
I just don't like how the big chains drives out the small businesses and
Well,
kind of
that's what I'm saying. They drive out
yeah,
the small businesses. They drive out the small businesses. They drive out people's
yeah.
apartment complexes, like people that
Wasn't it
can barely
also
afford their rent.
yeah? It's also raising the rent on the people and moving those people out.
Yeah,
It's
and then
not like
also, no.
you're improving the community for the people there. It's like you're forcing them out of the community because they can't afford it anymore than adding new people.
Right, and that's the
Yeah.
problem. And that's not just in one area of New Jersey. That's all across New Jersey, New York, Connecticut, Pennsylvania. I mean, and it's disgusting too, because it's like, by doing that, you're creating a society in which people who are very wealthy, majority Caucasian, coming in, taking over, and pushing out the middle class, the lower class, and you're creating this almost kind of like new utopia of poverty. And that in itself is unacceptable, because again, by saying to somebody, oh, you don't work hard enough, that's disgusting. And again, it's not a matter of rebuilding a building that's the problem. The problem is, how much is that going to really raise taxes on the people that are barely making their wages and all that jazz? Do you know what I'm saying?
And also for a supposed liberal state, New Jersey is pretty segregated too. Like
Very,
there's heavily
very.
like black areas, and then there's areas that are mainly white, and then it's like
Well,
that's what
remember,
yeah.
remember back in the day, which is a Wednesday, by the way. Um, in Newark and Irvington, they were predominantly white at one point. Patterson too. And a lot of that was, the Jewish communities, the Irish communities, the Italian communities, and then of course during the '60s, there was a huge migration going to other places because of the riots and this and that, and it just became this huge migration. And now I believe East Orange predominantly is like 96 to 98% Black, which is not a bad thing. It's just a matter of, again, things happen. But another reason that,
And it's interesting that. Sorry, you were
no. I was
yeah.
just going to say, and the other thing is that also when we were talking about real estate earlier, in terms of like a real estate agent trying to sell you a house, that also created a lot of buzz. If you get a chance to rewatch the movie or reread the book, A Raisin in the Sun, that's practically about that type of, subject matter in which we're talking about.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I think there's even parts of like the South that are more integrated now than like certain towns in New Jersey, like smaller town, like certain towns in the South, like more diverse, not like the super small ones, but yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I'm blessed, man. I'm in a place right now where, after all the, the mental anguish, the depression, the anxieties, especially after going through my treatment, because I went through something called Success TMS, which is a beautiful organization, by the way, that deal with like, mental illness and depending on how severe they are. And the stimulus treatment was amazing. And then combine that with my faith and my, Christianity, as well as my, my tribe of people that I have. I'm just in a very, very good spot to just A, be talking with you, and B, to really just want people to invest into each other again and to love on each other again.
Yeah, and so I'm glad that you said you're doing better with anxiety and depression and everything, and that faith and spirituality was a big part of that.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
And I'm not. I mean, I have a lot. I don't know if I call it anxiety or more ruminations, like OCD, kind of, fixating on the same thought, which causes a lot of anxiety and sometimes works me into a depression. But if I had to put a label in it, it would be more ruminations with OCD, I guess, which can kind of tie into that kind of thing. And meditation has been very helpful for me, and spirituality. I'm not really into one religion, but I do take influence from different religions, and I like a lot of the Hindu ideas actually in the Upanishads, and also with Buddhism and Taoism. Also, some of the ideas of Neville Goddard, who was I know he took some Christian concepts, but he did it into more getting yourself, like, kind of creating your reality through your thoughts, and there was kind of a spiritual thing behind it. But yeah, I do think like spirituality of some sort can help a lot with that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
But at any rate, man, dude, I just encourage anybody and everybody to just come on out to the Kemet Music and Arts Festival 2, Montclair Brewery, Saturday, July 31st, rain date, August 1st if necessary. It's one of those cases where it's more than just a concert, more than just a fundraiser. It's a celebration of Black excellence, but also Black encouragement, because I think that's what we really need from each other, is just to encourage, our brothers and our sisters of other cultures and other nations. Because again, it's not a matter about what you feel like you don't have to give. It's just by being there. And it's also by experiencing it. And even if you can't physically be there, we do have a live streaming service through Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube, and you can donate during the stream. I mean, we're going to be on from 2 to 10. That's 8 hours of music, brother. And tickets are only $20 in advance, $25 at the door. You can't beat that. And also there's going to be, Black owned vendors and, just beautiful art, food, drinks, all that stuff. And also mind you that for every ticket purchase, you have to order 2-drink minimum at the brewery. There's a lot of different great beers that you can select from. There's also going to be children's activities, and it's just going to be a wonderful time. And I just encourage anybody just to get out of their comfort zones, even despite the fact that we went through the pandemic, and really put the armor of God on and just come on out and just enjoy life again. Just do life again.
Yeah, definitely. It's good that things are opening up again. And, well, it looks like your bandwidth's low. I guess maybe we should, I don't know if there's any final thoughts or things you want to say. I feel like And sometimes like I'm asking the question, or like, I have the thought and then it trails off into another thought and then I forget the original thought. It's kind of like my improv coach was telling me that, like, I say a whole paragraph of stuff, but yeah, I don't know. So I feel like there was some stuff I wanted to get into that we didn't get into, but I think we covered most of it. So I don't know if there's any final thoughts you want to say.
Yeah, there is, man. I just wanna encourage everybody to support my boy Sean, because we go back quite a ways, and I know he's been on the grind. I mean, I've been advocating to really try to, like, be back on the show again and to really support him, and just BSing around as we usually do, and just sort of kind of shoot on the subjects of the modern era, and like what we know to be is true, and also what we believe to be is speculation, and just trying to figure out what's in between. Definitely support my boy Sean. I definitely see you, brother, being like the next, like, what the fuck podcast or WTF
Oh, thank you.
podcast. I mean, I definitely see that, because you're like you definitely have that aura of just like, whatever the subject matter is, and just going off that idea and just keep going. And yeah, final thoughts. Yeah, dude, Sean, you're more than welcome to come to the event. I encourage you, and your listeners to definitely come on out as well. And definitely to listen to some really, really good musicians, such as the band Little Bastard, who are the headliners of the event, myself and my band, Rostafa and Company, Howlin' Poets, Oz the Finale. We have a Latin band called Casavana, Lauren Sherrard, and I believe, yeah, and also a band called The Bard, which is a Montclair local band. And it's just going to be, and we're also going to have some speakers and poets and stuff. And if anybody wants to order tickets, they can go to Kemet, which is spelled Kemet, Fest, Fest, 2.eventbrite.com. You can also go find Kemet Music and Arts Festival 2 on Facebook, and say that you're going or what have you. And also, you can also even purchase tickets by calling or texting 201-463-9363. And I just hope everybody can make it out there and enjoy the beautiful day. God willing, we don't get rain. And yeah, just really just it, man. I just want to see positivity, positive energy back in the world again, and just really just celebrate life like we normally should do. And that's our natural state of being.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah. Thank you for coming on. Yeah, it's a nice day, but it's a humid day, but it's better than raining or something like that. But yeah, I'll definitely try to check out that show. That sounds like fun.
Right.
It'll be good to get to go into some local and live shows again. And yeah, man, we'll stay in touch and all that.
Absolutely, bro. Dude, thank you so much. Again, I apologize for the Wi-Fi and all that other stuff. This is what happens when you live in a dead zone. But dude, man, it's always a pleasure hearing from you. Let's definitely wrap again soon, and definitely talk about the subject matters that especially are important, because trust me, listeners they really need this type of content, because you never know who's listening.
Exactly. Yeah, and art, and like you were saying, like art and music's a good way for people to kind of get past those barriers, and connect with people they otherwise wouldn't. And that's because otherwise people kind of stay in their boxes and compartmentalize, like you were talking about before. And music and art can be a good way for people to get beyond that. So I think, if anything, art is the thing that's kind of making progress in a lot of ways, more than a lot of things, and breaking down those barriers, especially like you meet artists from all different backgrounds and everything too.
Absolutely, man. Sean, God bless you, man. I miss you, man. Let's definitely do it up one time.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, I mean, we're right in the same area, so we should hang one of these days, like West Orange, South Orange. So yeah, right.
Absolutely. Matter of fact, dude, I'll even send you a virtual flyer, brother, or I'll even send you a physical one, and we'll hopefully chart it up, and we'll definitely get people come out.
Yeah, man. Sounds good.
All right, bro. I'll definitely be talking to you soon. And guys, keep supporting my boy.
All right. Yeah. Thanks. I hope you all enjoyed my conversation with Rostafa. I meant to ask him during the episode what he thought the solution was for everything, and he said demilitarization when I asked him afterwards, and also community policing, which was pretty much what I'm for. Demilitarization and switching to community policing. And actually, they did that in Camden. They switched to community policing, which was had a lot of crime. It was a city in New Jersey with a lot of crime, and the crime went down when they switched to community policing. And also decriminalization of all nonviolent offenses. I think as long as you're not doing something that affects someone else in a negative way or hurts someone else, you should be allowed to do it. And as long as you're not, yeah. So I just think that your rights end where another person's begin should pretty much be the only law there is. But anyway, if you want to keep updated with future episodes of BSing with Sean K, listen to me on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Also, watch the few full videos on YouTube. And that's about it for this episode. I'll catch you on the next one.